Greetings, YouTube. Today I'll be reviewing Redefining Realness, My Path to Womanhood, Identity, Love, and So Much More by Janet Mock. Now, Janet Mock is a biracial black trans woman. She is half black, half Hawaiian. And this is a tough read. This was not easy for me to get through. And I know that people are going to say trigger warnings are silly, or just call them content warnings, or whatever you want to call them. It doesn't matter. But this book deals with physical abuse, abandonment issues, sexual molestation, sex work, just a host of horrible things that happened to this woman over the course of her life. But she is incredibly aware of her place in history, who she is, what she's gone through, and she's processed this in a very progressive, modern take, using the language that is currently common when people are discussing trans and cis issues. She's frank, she's honest, she doesn't pull any punches, and she freely admits that this is her recollections of these events going all the way back to her childhood. So they may not be perfect, as none of ours is either. I can tell you right now that there were entire years of my life where I couldn't tell you what I was doing. Um, but what she went through and what her parents put her through was unbelievable. Well, no, it isn't unbelievable. It's heartbreaking. It's actually really believable. As a person that has survived domestic abuse, being raised by an addict, and sexual molestation myself, yeah, it's all too friggin' believable. She was born into a family of multiple children, and her father, by the time he was at my age, roughly, he's 3 years older than me, I think. He had 6 children, I think. The first 3 were born in 1979, in January, February, and April of that year. Now, the smart ones amongst you will realize that those were 3 different women. So, responsibility is not his name. His girlfriend, I don't remember if they ever got married or not. It must have been his girlfriend, but Janet Mock's father, was in the military when her mother met him. She had already had 2 daughters, and she had 2 sons with him. No, so that makes 7. Yeah, he had another one coming up too. Yeah, so 6 kids for him. Her mother had 5. Now, when Janet came around, her older siblings, her 2 older sisters, were in their almost teen years. There was a big age gap between the 2 of them. I think it was like 8 or 10 years, I think, possibly between her and the oldest. And her mother had been dating a man, and she got pregnant and decided that she really wanted to concentrate on her new relationship. So she shipped her 2 boys, people she perceived as boys, only one of them which was a boy, to California to live with their father. So they moved to California to live with their father, separating them from their mother a world away. I mean, Hawaii and California are really far apart. It's a big difference. And they get sent to Oakland in the 90s, just as the crack epidemic hit. And her father became a crackhead. Yep. And over the course of her life with him, he had a string of girlfriends. He would go after single women who would be okay with a guy that had kids of his own. And they would just live with these women from girlfriend after girlfriend after girlfriend. And eventually they settled down to one particular household with a really nice woman who was unfortunately her 15-year-old son raped Janet every single day for 2 years, and no one knew a thing. Eventually, they moved after he became a crack addict. They eventually moved to Texas, where he kicked his crack habit, but remained an alcoholic and addicted to nicotine, setting a fine example for his children. Thankfully, the extended family in Texas helped to give Janet some of the support she needed. Eventually, she and her brother went back to Hawaii, where her mother was now living in an apartment with her two oldest daughters, one of who had two children of her own, her son from her boyfriend, and she essentially lived at her boyfriend's house for a week to 2 weeks at a time, only coming back on the weekends to say hello or take them out, and then leaving again, allowing her 20-year-old daughter to take care of her two own children and her 3 children. So incredibly irresponsible, and even more abandonment issues. I mean, first of all, she kicks him off the island onto the continent. When she finally takes him back, she just ignores them most of the time. Eventually, her high school sweetheart, who fathered the 2 oldest daughters, he comes back into her life. She dumps her boyfriend, starts dating him again. He's a lifelong criminal. He's the bad boy she'd always convinced herself she could help fix. Guess what you can't do? You can't help fix anybody. He eventually gets hooked on meth. Guess what her mother gets hooked on? You got it. And all the while, Janet is trying to be the girl she is. Eventually, she starts getting hormones from a friend of hers, her friend's doctor. Like, her friend is getting a prescription for hormones that she doesn't even need, so she can pass them on to Janet Mock. Eventually, she convinces her mother to sign the paperwork so she can get her own hormones, but the problem is her mother's becoming more and more erratic, cannot actually cover the cost. So the only thing that Janet can do to help cover the cost of the hormones that she so desperately needs is become a sex worker at 16. And eventually, at 18, she goes into it full-blown while going to college as a full-time student. So she can get the money together to get the genital reconstruction surgery that she so desperately needs. At this point in her life, her mother is a meth addict, and the whole family is friggin' homeless. Janet eventually gets her surgery by becoming not only a sex worker, but a porn star. Gets the money, goes to Thailand, which in reality is one of the best places to go to get genital reconstruction surgery done. And not only is it less expensive, in 2001 it was $7,000 in Thailand, and that included a 7-day stay at the center. In America, it's $30,000, and that's not covering your housing and such. And the people in Thailand have done hundreds. Her doctor had done over 1,000 of these operations. So he is very well skilled in this process. She eventually has the surgery done. She gets to go back home, and now she gets to be the woman she's always wanted to be. Graduated from her college in Hawaii, and then did some grad student work in New York City living as a full-fledged woman, no one knowing that she is trans, only revealing it to a very select few, including eventually the man that she falls in love with. It's an inspiring book, but it's heartbreaking. There are parts in this I almost couldn't let my eyes take the words in. So if you want to really know what it is like to have this experience, to live that life, to go through what it took to become who she really was all along, and dealing with all the crap of being a black trans woman in the world, dealing with the backlash of not being black enough or not being Hawaiian enough, of the backlash of not being a boy of enough or being a girl of enough, dealing with her father, who not only desperately wanted her to be a boy, but his ego was so fragile that he could not tolerate the concept that she was in fact not a boy. When she finally tells him, he has the temerity to be upset that her tone was disrespectful. Sir, you were not worthy of her respect. You were not worthy of anyone's respect. You were a crack at it. You failed your children. And you failed your children because you were trying to live vicariously with your ego through your daughter, who you thought was a boy, because you wouldn't accept her for who she was. So screw you, sir. Janet Mock may have forgiven him, but I sure haven't. So it's an awesome book. It's a really hard read, but I recommend it. I'm going to ask a friend of mine if she wants to read it. I know my wife does first. But yeah, be prepared, folks. This is not going to be a simple thing to get through.